is Nicola Cangialosi, and I'm here as the moderator of a workshop titled The Human Factor in Industry 4.0. So, very briefly, I'm going to introduce to you our speakers and our research group, which is part of international collaboration with UmbraGroup, led by Professor Carlo Doardi of the University of Florence, Professor Adalgisa Battistelli of the University of Bordeaux, and finally Jean-Sébastien Baudriat of the University of Montreal. So we'll have 6 different topics. We'll start with the role of HR for Industry 4.0, and the speaker is Guillaume Després, following by me, Nicola Cangialosi, talking about the role of workplace learning. Afterwards, we'll discuss artificial intelligence with Vivienne Machotra. Following, we have Nicolas Bazin, that couldn't make it here, but we're still going to present his speech, which will talk about career development in the Industry 4.0. Then we'll have skills. We'll talk about skills with Marco Peña Jimenez. And finally, we'll discuss work design for Industry 4.0, again, with Léa Freur. So without further ado, I'm just going to introduce you to Guillaume Després.
Thank you. So, dear participants, thanks for your attending our presentation on the role of human factor in Industry 4.0. I am Guillaume Després, PhD in work and organizational psychology, working at UmbraGroup, a multinational specialized in the production of micro and macro ball screw for aerospace. I propose that we look together at ORBTech, a Marie Sklodowska-Curie project in the Society and Enterprise panel funded by the European Commission via Horizon 2020. So, first, let's introduce the Industry 4.0 theme. If you already heard about it, it will be a reminder. If not, welcome to this marvelous theme. The first thing is that, in a nutshell, Industry 4.0 is a continuous automation of traditional manufacturing and industrial practices using modern, smart technologies. It is related to the fourth revolution. The difference between the fourth revolution and the previous one is rooted in the interconnection between the device and the presence of an artificial intelligence that learns by itself, through interaction with humans, but also with other robots or other machines. The key point is that the device can analyze and diagnose problems without the need for human intervention. Digitization is initially designed to allow an easier interaction between technology and humans. Thus, Industry 4.0, if well managed, should enhance the performance and well-being of workers. Therefore, new way of thinking and living the industry implies change. All the actors in the organization must have a new way of working. Digitization also involves the disappearance for workers of routine tasks with low significance. It is therefore necessary to rethink teaching and learning methods for the organization's actors. New way of working, learning, and teaching also imply new knowledge, skills, and ability for staff. Workers will need to be flexible and adaptable in their interaction with more complex and specialized jobs. In sum, one of the key points related to Industry 4.0 is a radical change in job tasks. I will say no more and leave my esteemed colleagues to examine these various implications in more details after. And on this basis, we will try to show you that it's no longer only useful to ask how technology influences the members of an organization and their environment, but that is also necessary to understand the systemic interaction that link each of these components. In short, of each of the technological, societal, and human actors simply influence to allow themselves to evolve together. This new revolution approach from a systemic point of view implies a multitude of acts to investigate. For example, the labor market, the issue of occupational health, learning method for the industry, or the study of individual development and its effects on careers. Each of these axes must be considered by human resources to ensure proper organizational functioning in an Industry 4.0 context. We will now focus on the role of human resources in Industry 4.0 through the ORBTECH project called Organizational Behavior with New Technology, a human resource management model for Industry 4.0. Why try to develop a human resource model adapted to Industry 4.0? Human resource can simply be summarized as a set of policies and practices implemented to manage, mobilize, and develop the human and technological factors involved in an organization activity. The rapid and autonomous development of technologies requires the development of new organizational practice and rules. From these new practices and expectations on the part of human resources can emerge tensions. Indeed, digitalization could lead to the disappearance of routine tasks and skills in favor of the emergence of more complex tasks. Thus, it requires from management to understand what employees' competence they need to generate and maintain success and to simultaneously make it easier to monitor such competencies. In addition, when human resources have multiple functions, such as developing talent, focusing on strategy, and planning, answering work ethics, or selecting optimal staff, their role tends to change over time. While the administrative role that has traditionally been the dominant one for the human resource, the operational and employee advocate roles are increasingly being emphasized in many organizations. The strategic role requires the ability and focus to contribute to strategic decisions and to be recognized by upper management for these efforts. This practice is likely to grow as firms expect human resource groups to be involved in the strategic planning process and to prepare employees to be more strategic. In this context of Industry 4.0, human resource staff need to understand the business so that the strategy should match its needs. One of the keys to answering the sustainability and competitiveness of an organization is the constant development of innovations, whether it is an organizational objective, a behavior, or a final product. The innovation process follows a dynamic trajectory composed of three mutually influencing phases. The generating phase, when you create ideas, the promotion phase, when you talk about the ideas and seek support to bring it to fruition, and the realization phase, when you implement or build the ideas. Digitalization can play a major role in the development of each phase of innovation. To do so, it must be organic, with low organizational formalization and horizontal management, a sharing of information and knowledge, and high professionalization of employees. In this case, digitalization helps employees to develop a higher level of knowledge, skills, and capabilities, and thus to create innovation rather than improve routine. The focus on human resource practices that identify, evaluate, develop, and reward individuals and teams should improve the emergence of innovative behavior. Through the study of organizational behaviors, the ORBTECH project tried to specify why are the best practices of human resource management likely to promote innovation in Industry 4.0. To create our human resource model for Industry 4.0, we have chosen to base it on the model of development of ability, motivation, and opportunity. The AMO framework stresses that the combination of abilities, motivation, and opportunities affect organizational performance through the individual effort. Some of the key factors related to innovation in Industry 4.0 will be linked to development training and reward practices, to the emergence of creative skills, or to foster autonomy and information sharing. This has led us to develop a model that is useful at all levels, be it oriented to organization, teams, individuals, clients, or artificial intelligence. According to the literature and some of our findings, managing the right environmental factors will develop positive psychological attachment and create cognitive and motivational drivers to help implement proactive answers, such as the emergence of change and proactive behaviors, but also strategic skills, knowledge, ability, and opportunities. Proactive responses would then answer fit to technology and the emergence of innovation, leading to the improved well-being and perceived performance. We have presented here a simplified version of our model. For example, it could be more complex with the proactive answer and the dimension of performance and perceived well-being that should also create a change in the dimension of environmental factors that's answering a constant evolution of all the organizational actors. Also, the OPTAC project is trying to provide case for the proper functioning of Industry 4.0. Much remains to be done. For example, it would be useful to explore transnational intra-organizational networks, or to develop theoretical specificity about knowledge, skills, ability, and other characteristics and their effects. As you will see in the following presentation, our team tried to fill the gap on the learning process, the role of artificial intelligence, the career development, the typology of job characteristics, and the need, skills, and knowledge for Industry 4.0. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, good afternoon again. My name is Nicola Cangialosi, and I'm a research fellow at the University of Florence. Oh, there you go. No problem. Thank you very much. So, today I'm going to talk about workplace learning for the Industry 4.0. Now, when we talk about Industry 4.0, as Guillaume has pointed out, it's kind of a buzzword because there's a lot of changes connected to it, especially when it comes to both work and the content of work. However, when we take a closer look to it, we see that the changes have a pretty big spectrum of facets. For example, some tasks will be unchanged by the introduction of technology. Other tasks instead will be completely replaced by introduction of technology. But the majority of tasks will actually be accelerated or enabled. Thus, they are emerging from the introduction of technology or just made bigger by it. So, task disruption. Of course, we know by the World Economic Forum that 13% of job content is going to change in the next 2 years. So, we know that this is happening and it's happening fast. How is it changing? Regarding the content, we have both a change in the relevance of XEOs and the emerging of brand new XEOs. Now, I don't usually like to use jargon. XEOs stands, of course, for knowledge, skills, ability, and other capabilities, which is a package that basically delivers the content of job. So, given that this is the scenario, there is a strong need for both upskilling and reskilling the workforce, both for the implementation of this technology, but also to maximize the effect of technology. And here is what I'm going to discuss about. It's how do we do it? Because, of course, organizations are already troubled by both time pressure and economical pressure, and at the same time, they're required to invest in technology and upskill and reskill the workforce. So how do we do it? The traditional way to go about it would be training. Of course, we know training. It's a long-standing practice that works in a very linear fashion. You provide XEOs to the workforce that will apply them in a context, most likely a problem-solving context, thus obtaining performance. Now, from traditional studies, we know that there are at least two major problems with this, which is knowledge transfer. Knowledge doesn't transfer as well as we naively would think. So if you learn something in an environment, you often have a very hard time to move it to another environment. And there is skill retention. Of course, people tend to forget what they learn, and they forget it a lot faster when there are a lot of stimuli. I would argue that it's also a third problem with training, which is the ever-changing nature of technology nowadays. So if you are trained for the usage of any machinery, then you will have to be retrained often for the apps that will follow through. So given these problems, one solution that seemed to work is workplace learning. Now, workplace learning work on the vice versa of training. It's problem-based, so it derives from the problem, and the solution will create new knowledge content that then can be shared in the organization. Now, a few facts. When we see what knowledge content we find in an organization, we do see that 80% of that, from 70 to 80%, I have been dramatizing in here, but about 80% of the content comes from informal workplace learning. That is to say, all the learning that happens during the experience of the work, leaving only, of course, the 20% to training, which it's a problem given the amount of investment that companies do on training. So why workplace learning seems to be a better solution? Well, first of all, it's efficient. As I said, it provides 80% of the content without any cost. So, of course, it's a better deal. It's continuous, so you don't need to reskill. Every time a new problem will arise, of course, people will try to solve it, thus incrementing continuously the knowledge content of the organization and offer a broader array of results. That is to say, tacit knowledge. A lot of course, workplace learning offer its tacit knowledge, which is experience, basically. So this is a general model of workplace learning, which, as you can see, is divided into two subunits. We have the learning from the task and learning from others. Now, learning from the task, of course, is a psychological and behavioral process that leads both to reflection upon the problem and experimentation on the problem. So the idea is that when you're facing a problem, you can both reflect upon it and find a solution, or you can experiment with it and, again, find a solution, which then, in turn, becomes a new knowledge content available for the whole organization. The other side of workplace learning is, of course, more social, and it's learning from others. That can be both from the supervisor, so more linear, or from colleagues, so more horizontal. Now, of course, this model was from Nikolova, is broadly accepted. There is an extra input that I want to give you from this model. Of course, we see that this construct is both a personal construct, that is to say, a proactive construct, because people to learn have to reflect, have to go to their supervisor, so it has a behavioral component, but also it's an organizational component, because unless the organization, of course, provides any sorts of learning opportunities, this will not take place. So, what do we see in literature that seem to work to foster workplace learning? We do know that on the task side, of course, work design matters, especially when you talk to autonomy, because autonomy both provides opportunity to reflect and to experiment on your task. At the same time, climate seems to work very well on the task, both learning climate and error tolerance. Of course, if you perceive your company to be error tolerant, you're more likely to engage in experimental behaviors. From the social side, we see trust. Trust is one known motor for learning. If you trust your colleagues and supervisor, you're more likely to present them problems. We know that if you don't trust them, that's not going to happen. Social support from the supervisor is also a key element to provide learning opportunities from the supervisor. And finally, social networks, which stems from the idea that if people can connect efficiently with their colleagues. Of course, they're going to exchange with them. Thus, this can become a learning opportunity. So that is all for me now. Thank you for your attention.
Sorry. Thank you very much. So, hi everyone, my name is Vivian and I am a PhD student in Industrial and Organizational Psychology at the University of Montreal. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the influences of artificial intelligence on the workplace. So artificial intelligence, it's a subject that we hear a lot about. I'm sure most of you have seen movies or TV shows where artificial intelligence was the star. Also, if you look at the news, in any other day, you will see AI making headlines with its new discoveries and new capabilities. So, one question remains with all these sources of information is what exactly is artificial intelligence? So there doesn't exist to this day one official definition of what AI is. So I took out for you a few of the most important ones. The first one comes from a group of scientists who are now pretty famous and who coined the first definition of AI, which is a machine that behaves the same way humans do. So it's basically our equivalent in a machine. Another definition comes from Alan Turing. For him, a machine is undistinguishable from a human when it has artificial intelligence. So this brings us to the argument of a weak versus strong AI. So I think all of you have heard that AI is all around us, that we have it in our daily lives. For example, if you have an iPhone, Siri will be considered an AI. If you do research on Google, the algorithms can sometimes be considered AI. So what are we talking about here? Actually, these types of AI that we see in our daily lives are actually weak AI. So weak AI simulates human thinking, but for this project, my interest was actually strong AI. So the AI you will see in movies and the AI who has the ability to think by itself. To this day, it still does not exist. So all the articles that I've analyzed to come up with my results were pretty much hypothetical and more predictive of what's coming in the future. All right, so the question comes now. So if those super intelligent machines that are undistinguishable from humans come and work with us, what will the future workplace look like? When I started my research, I soon realized that the state of the scientific literature was quite messy. I had quite a difficult start beginning my research, understanding exactly what the impacts were of artificial intelligence. And that's where I realized that it was actually not me reading properly the articles, but it's actually the fact that there are many perspectives and they're all mixed up in the literature. So all things considered, it's a pretty new subject, so that's kind of normal at this stage. So within all the different perspectives and all the different arguments, two main points of view still emerge. So the first one is pretty catastrophic, and it's that AI will replace the human worker and that all jobs will mainly be abolished and that humans will become very sad at home, unemployed. The other perspective is a little bit more positive, and that's where human and AI will coexist in a workplace that is redefined. So the new workplace that, like strong AI, doesn't exist yet. So the question is now, what will this new redefined workplace look like? So the objective of my study was to clear up a little bit the mess that is in the scientific literature and see which one of those two perspectives is the most popular among authors. So, like I said, that would help clear up and put a bit of order in the literature, and would also create, hopefully, a first line of direction for future research. So how did I proceed to my research? So I did a literature review. I'll save you all the details, but just please remember that we have looked at over 2,000 articles. So that was my confinement plan, if you were wondering. I read more than 2,000 articles and came up with 55 articles at the end, following all the inclusion and exclusion criteria. So now about the results. Which of the two perspectives is the most popular and most probable? Thankfully, is the more positive one. So none of the articles selected forecast a negative and very dire future for the human workers. We or scientific literature, predicts a more of a coexistence within jobs. So in terms of the redefined workplace, what will this look like? So two possible outcomes were identified. The first one is collaboration on a job level, and the other one was a collaboration on a task level. Let me explain the difference between both. So the first collaboration that we might see between workers and AI is on the job level. So this argument is based on the concept of creative destruction, which was brought upon by Schumpeter in the 1940s. He was an Austrian economist. And so according to him, the replacement of let's say old things or old elements is actually very normal. It's part of change, it's part of evolution. So in order to move forward, old technologies, for example, can be put aside, or old jobs that don't really, are not very much efficient anymore, can be put aside and leave the place for new jobs. So authors say that this will be the case for AI. And as an example, we will see that more routine input-output type of jobs are at risk of being completely transferred to AI. So those workers who are doing these jobs right now are at risk, yes, of losing their jobs completely. However, in this perspective, it's not completely negative, because the authors predict that new jobs will be created that are more in line with the new reality of AI, and the workers will have the opportunity to skill up or acquire different knowledge and be part of those new jobs. So the jobs will either be novel, never been seen before. For example, businesses will have their resident AI ethicists or personnel looking at the technology. Or we can also see an increased demand for already existing jobs. An example is the job of a doctor. So some authors predict that medical doctors are at risk of completely disappearing because, according to them, their main task, which are detecting diseases and making a diagnosis, can be replaced by a machine. So in consequence, the profession of a doctor will be eliminated, and there will be an increased demand for nurses. In that, nurses will get the information from the AI in terms of diagnosis and focus more on the relation with the patients, for example, or having a more empathy in their jobs. So that's this perspective. So at the end, if you look at the little graph there, you can see the worker and the AI each going to work every day, so each having their own jobs. So now on the other type of coexisting is at the task level. So this is anchored in Polanyi's paradox, where basically this argument is that we know more than we can tell. So it's a little bit like riding a bicycle. We can describe to someone as best we can the steps to ride a bicycle, but inherently it's very hard to explain the feeling of doing it and how automatic it is. So according to this perspective, jobs will never be fully done by AI simply because we cannot train AI to do something that even we have a hard time understanding and explaining. So no jobs would be lost in this perspective, but workers will collaborate with AI, each having their own tasks. So in this perspective, routine input-output tasks and not jobs will be delegated to AI, and workers will have more time and energy to do other tasks. So namely, we can see tasks that are more unlikely to be transferred to AI, such as creativity, like I said before, having a focus more on interpersonal relationships, having more empathy, and also customizing products and services for clients. So if we take the perspective of the doctor, here we will see that doctors will not cease to exist, but doctors will redefine their roles, and having the help of the AI to do the diagnosis and examine the patients, they will have more time to establish, for example, customized treatment plans, or for having a deeper relationship with their patients, and adding more warmth to their jobs. So at the end of the day, workers and AI will collaborate on the same jobs. So a few key elements that I would like to share with you in closing this presentation. The first one actually is a little parenthesis, is to be very cautious. One thing I've realized analyzing the literature is that AI is a buzzword, a little bit like Industry 4.0. It is often used to describe articles that actually do not mention real AI. So I advise you to be very careful and look at AI with a critical eye, and see if we are actually talking about AI, so a machine that would think and behave like a human, or are we talking more about automation or digitalization? So this is something to keep in mind. Second point, well, let's rejoice a little bit. The future is not bleak for workers. We have a positive future ahead of us, according to the majority of the authors on the subject. And third point that is important to keep in mind is also that we know have some hypothesis about the impact of AI at a job and task level, but still there are no research that are looking at the impacts that would have on the personnel level. So at the psychological level of workers, and this is something that we really need to work on, and that I will hope to have the pleasure of doing during this year. So thank you very much.
So, unfortunately, Nicolas Bazin, PhD student in psychology and work and organizational psychology from University of Bordeaux and from University of Toulouse, face unfortunate issues. So I will read his speech, and we will explore together the impact of technologies and the fourth industrial revolution on learning and its influence on careers. Sorry. One of the most important impacts of the fourth industrial revolution is the omnipresence of technology. Technologies have penetrated every aspect of life and have radically changed the way we work. Many authors have pointed out that there are no more technologies than people in the world. To provide a frame of references in this presentation, we focus mainly on information and communication technologies and new ones. Today, it is impossible to work without technologies. This technological omnipresence has induced a psychotechnological environment. This environment reflects the fact that individuals live in interaction with technologies. Thus, we can argue that many tasks at work depend on technologies. We assume that this new environment offers new learning opportunities. These technologies have increased the opportunities to learn. Learning is more accessible through technologies, and technologies offer many constraints. We have conceptualized this environment along two dimensions: the opportunity to develop knowledge and skills and the availability of technology. We assume that the perception of the psychotechnical environment revolves around two dimensions: opportunity and accessibility. Our research seeks to understand how technologies, the new environment, and psychological characteristics will enable the development of skills with technologies. We focus on the psychological characteristics of Protean career orientation, a state of mind that captures the pursuit of personal growth in line with their values. It means I have my objectives of careers, I will follow them, I will create it, and all my careers will follow this objective we have. So I will follow the previous plan I had for my career. So I create a Proteus of my career. This concept is composed of two dimensions: value and self-orientation, which reflects the fact that individuals develop their career in accordance with their inner values. This is a graphical representation of the assumption. We hypothesize that the psychotechnical environment and Protean career guidance can enhance learning behavior through technologies that could promote strategic career behaviors. The psychotechnological environment will promote learning behaviors because individuals perceive that they have more opportunities to learn. This fact has been highlighted in the literature on learning, which, in an environment where there are more opportunities to learn, leads to learning behavior. Career counseling would promote learning behavior because it motivates individuals to adapt to changing environment and therefore encourage them to learn. And, as mentioned earlier, learning would allow for the development of new configuration capable of responding to emerging needs, particularly in terms of career, through the implementation of strategic behaviors. In summary, our model highlights how technology will be beneficial for skills development and career advancement. We have therefore developed several tools intended to be an additional resource for professionals and managers to evaluate perception technologies as a source and resource for learning, which will enable them to be valued in the development of competencies offered by organizations. The thing is really interesting because if we take a look back at our model, it's really important to see that the Protean career orientation and the psychotechnological environment will together construct the learning behavior with the technologies. And thus, we will have the possibility to allow people to think to their strategic career behaviors and to develop a career more adapted to what they they accept to have. And we accept that this research will help to better understand how people choose their career and how they evolve during their career. Thank you.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for being here with us today, and to those who are connected via the webcast, thank you so much. Well, I'm Marco Peña Jimenez. I'm a PhD student in work and organizational psychology in a co-tutel doctoral program between the University of Bordeaux and the Complutense University of Madrid, and under the supervision of Professor Battistelli and Professor Mirko Antino, respectively. So, what are the skills that we need in this day and age? In the digital age where the technologies are already changing our lives? The objective of my presentation that it will be trying to identify not only what are the most important aspects of the organizational phenomena, but also trying to explore what are the skills that we need in this day and age. Before tackling the skills issue, I'm going to try to present some relevant aspects of the organizational phenomena in the Industry 4.0. As my colleague said before, we consider that in this day and age, technologies, ubiquitous and smarter technologies, are already changing not only the world of work and organizations, but also the way we work. Taking into account this idea, we consider that organizations will become a more smart, complex, and dynamic system. So this is not only a physical reality, but also a virtual reality that we are supposed to deal. In this case, we consider that the employees are not mere passive agents, but rather they are active and transforming agents of the work environment. Therefore, we consider that there is a need for radical and transformative action from the organization, not only to adapt these technologies or integrate these technologies, but also to well integrate these technologies with the work environment and the employees that they have to deal with these technologies. So in this context, we consider that it becomes essential not only to identify, but also developing these skills to face a new context where the level of technology, the complexity of technology, the way we interact with other technologies has changed. In this context, even now, we have to deal with a new work environment. Actually, the current pandemic situation has pushed it in a new work environment. For example, remote working, and we have to work in a virtual way with other people. So, what are the proposals regarding the skill that we need in this new digital age? According to the literature review, we can identify several proposals regarding the skills. One of them, probably one of the most used in this, at the moment, we can see in the Skills for Futures report presented by the World Economic Forum, where they present basically the idea that the skills that we need is a new hierarchy of skills. For instance, as we can see, we can identify at least 3 skills that we needed in the 2015. For instance, complex problem solving, coordinating with others, people management. While in 2020, we need complex problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, and as you can see in the slide. But even if we consider that we need several skills, even if we acknowledge that we need digital and specific and technical skills, we propose that we need to develop the capacity to adapt to changes. For instance, we based on the social cognitive theory, we developed the idea of human agency. This capacity of the people to adapt to not only themselves, but also their surrounding work environment, based where the response of the individual is not only a response of the personal characteristics, but also the environmental factors. So the action is at the end the response of the cognitive, affective, motivational, and selection process. In this day and age, we consider that this human agency, we can foster in the human agency through the self-adaptation, the self-renewal, and the self-development could be a valuable capacity to increase in the workforce. Our preliminary results have shown that we can identify several kinds of skills, but we focus in specific clusters of skills. In our research, in a highly technological workplace, in a highly technological company, actually in Italy, we identify based on 30 indicators of skills, what are the skills that people require at the moment. So in 2019, We identify 4 clusters of skills, and then in 2020, we identified the same 4 clusters of skills. The most relevant idea behind this research is that we identify 2 main skills related to the strategic making process. We identify cognitive skills and strategic skills. And the secondary skills related to this work environment were managing people and functional business skills. In general, I would like to finish this intervention by specifying 3 main ideas. The first one is that we recognize that a more complex, a more dynamic and smart work environment is changing all the way of work, but we need, in this case, strategic cognitive skills, but it's obviously specific and digital and technical skills. We consider that developing skills could be a valuable way to prepare the workforce in this new future where changing, complex, and uncertain world of work is already present. And finally, we consider that this kind of skill, this cluster of skills, cognitive and strategic skills, can be a valuable source to be used for the organization to prepare the workforce for dealing with this ongoing process of transformation of the world of work. Before to finish, I would like to invite you, if you are interested in this topic and obviously the other topics in our intervention, to visit our website of the Proteus, Psychological Research on Technological and Human Synergy, if you are interested in any further information. So, having said that, thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Léa Fréault. I am a PhD student. I'm doing a joint PhD between France, in Bordeaux, and in Belgium, in Brussels. So, oh, sorry, here he is. So I am glad to be here to share with you some of the preliminary findings of my research thesis that deals with work design and Industry 4.0. So I'm not gonna dive into Industry 4.0 because Guillaume has introduced it for you. So I would just say in a nutshell that Industry 4.0 may be conceived as a technological change. It will change things in the organization. And because in the scientific literature, Industry 4.0 has not been defined by the scientific literature, it is really difficult to investigate this subject. So we decided to take a technological approach and studying Industry 4.0 through the introduction of digital technologies in the workplace. But before talking about what is work design and define it to you, I will like to ask you a question. What do digital technologies really change in the workplace? Just think about it for 15 seconds. And I'm sure if you heard the former presentations that you have maybe some clues to answer it. I wanted it to be interactive, but with the COVID-19, it is difficult. So to me, digital and technologies more broadly change what people do, their tasks, for example, and the procedures they are asked to. It also changed the way people work, like you may stop to use an old technology and started to use another one. It also changed how it may also change how you collaborate with others to achieve your tasks. But also, as we have seen with Marco, it may also imply other skill requirements. And it can also change the organizational context as a whole. When I say organizational context, I mean like the context in company. So by establishing, for example, a new organizational structure, or also by changing the strategy of the company. And so, fortunately, work design helped to capture all of these changes. So, to define it, I will define work design quickly and broadly to you as the employee perception of their work characteristics. So your job have some characteristics. So this is a subjective perception of your work. Those work characteristics have been studied in the literature, and some meta-categories have been developed. So one of them is the content of your tasks, of your job tasks. I put some example for you to have more concrete idea about what I'm talking about. The cognitive requirement of your job tasks, and also the relationship in your work, and the context of your work. So when you have a high perception of those characteristics in your job, it is going to be more, to be better, and than if you have a low presence of these work characteristics. Why am I saying that? Is because the literature has shown that those characteristics in your job are related to relevant outcomes for people, for organizations, so maybe for practitioners in the audience today. So those characteristics are related to relevant outcomes like job performance, job satisfaction, and employee motivation. And we know that, so we assume that technology may change so your work characteristics by changing your task, by changing the relationship at work, by changing the technology you're using and everything. And so this will have an impact, maybe, on those relevant outcomes, so satisfaction, performance, and motivation. That's why it is relevant to understand what are the changes that are brought by digital technologies today in organizations as those technologies are introduced. And this was my research question from my preliminary study I did. So I interviewed some employees in a large company about two technologies, which were drones and robotic automation process. For those who don't know what is robotic automation process, this is not a robot, this is an algorithm, which can only do what it is programmed for. So it is an if-then-else algorithm. And so I asked them for what were the changes brought by digital technologies in their work and the subjective perceptions of these changes. So some of the findings, some of the relevant findings I wanted to share with you was this one. So participants reported that there were a redistribution of tasks between human and technology, because technology was doing the repetitive tasks while humans were still doing the difficult task and had to manage the hazardous events in their job. So this is quite related to what Vivian said before. And also, we can see a new collaboration between technology and human, because technology was perceived by employees as a non-human agent. So they were aware that the technology was not human, but still was perceived as an agent because it is still able to log in the software and is using the same interface as all the workers. So what can be concluded from those findings is that as long as technologies are not a threat, or not perceived as a threat, technologies are not perceived as a threat as long as they're executing low human control tasks and tasks that don't require a high human expertise. And so the perception of agency in technologies may be an explanatory mechanism for the changes that we have observed in work characteristics. So this is an hypothesis and it still needs to be validated. And another study that I am investigating right now is reactions, so the employee reactions to those technological changes. Often, organizational changes often fail. So organizations try to implement new technologies, for example, and but no, they're not effective. And a common assumption is that a common explanation given is that it is because of employee resistance. So I would like to overcome this explanation, and I was more interested in how employees are active in those changes. As Marco introduced you with the agency framework of Bandura, we assume that employees are active and they will try to influence and shape those changes in their work. And so I am interested in the relationship between the leader and the employees and the ongoing influence processes that may occur between them. So this is an ongoing study, so I don't have findings for you, but just to say that with this study, we would like to overcome the employee resistance paradigm by advocating that employees have a rational logic behind it, and they try to influence the technological changes because they are motivated to have a high presence of the work characteristics I've shown you. So this is the end for me, and thank you for your attention.
I think we have addressed several different topics regarding the subject. Now we, of course, take questions, and we thank you for your attention anyway, if there are any. Well, if not, I will proceed to ask a few questions. Yes? Oh, there's some question online. Okay, first question is skills for managing people. Obviously, for those who would be assigned to manage people, the bosses and the subordinates, question mark, who will not have the tasks to manage people. All right, that's a pretty interesting question. So the question, I repeat, is skills for managing people. So I guess it's for Marco, I'm guessing. Obviously for those who will be assigned to manage people, but what for those who are not assigned to manage people? For example, the subordinates who will not have to deal with the people. I think I can briefly introduce, and then I will leave it to you. I think when we talk about managing with people, it's both a leadership question, but also a coordination question. It seems that recent development in sales and skills in general will require people to interact in a more profound way, if you will. And in general, it seems to be a skill for this reason. But let's hear from Marco.
I don't know if I can use this microphone.
Yeah, it's working.
Okay, well, first of all, yeah, as you mentioned before, we are not trying to say that when we speak about managing people, we try to say that we have to deal with other people. Even if I'm not a supervisor, I can exchange with other people. I can discuss with other people. I have to negotiate some ideas. So in this case, when we are talking about managing people, we are discuss about a cluster of skills that we need to exchange, negotiate, solving problems in a collaborative way with other people. So that's the idea behind this cluster of skills.
Okay. I think we broadly answered this question. However, I just want to add that, of course, bosses have to manage people, but again, also people who are not in position to deal with subordinates will have to coordinate. So I have a question for Guillaume, actually, which is on the role of HR. What I was thinking while you were presenting is that at the same time, HR is promoting and helping this process of transition between industry 3.0, let's call it that, and industry 4.0. But at the same time, it's applying the technology in order to foster this transition. I would like you to elaborate on that.
I don't really understand. You want me to?
Yeah, if you can just elaborate on the fact that HR in this transition moment has, it seems to me at least two facets. Yeah. From one side, he's boosting the introduction of technology. On the other side is in using those technologies. For instance, we know the big data, or for example, I can also ask to Vivienne, because we know that artificial intelligence is right now used in the selection process. So, at the same time, these two things happen.
Totally. It just like kind of answers in the question. Yes, totally. Actually, HR, the actual role of HR, it's to help to introduce this Industry 4.0, to boost the changing of the reality we have actually. And the fact is that I can saw in the organization where I am working that HR are important role to develop the innovation, like I told you, and to help the organization to focus on strategic orientation, to be more oriented to the Industry 4.0. And we can help the organization and all the levels of the organization to have this, sorry, I have a fly that just come to talk with me. I don't know if, so we are here to manage the change from Industry 3.0 to Industry 4.0, and I can saw in the organization where I work that there is a biggest role played by the HR, by helping people to know how to manage, to develop the leadership, to develop the new way of thinking, the tasks, that, like said my colleagues. And I think...
you answered the question. Thank you. We will follow with Viviana. Of course, same question with the AI. For example, regarding recruiting, can we really trust AI at the moment to recruit people?
Yeah, thank you, Nicola, for this question. It's actually a very good question. Unfortunately, I was not able to cover everything in my presentation today, given the time period allowed, but definitely trust in AI is a big subject right now and something that has to be considered. Some firms are starting to hire based on algorithms, and the people who adopt AI and are big fans of it, their argument is that AI is, at the moment, weak AI, if we call it like that, is actually only able to do what humans teach it to do. So it's limited by that. And what has been seen in a lot of organizations who took part in research is that the bias that already exists in organization were fed to algorithms, so where algorithms learn the bias that already existed. So as a result, some companies have observed some bias in the data coming out of the algorithm, for example, preferring male over female applicants. But what has been shown is that it's not the algorithm itself who is biased, but more the human teacher, let's say, of the machine. So, for example, if an organization has always preferred males coming from top-notch universities in the United States who had played, let's say, varsity football, for example, well, that's their data on their best performers will come from males, and that's only normal. That's the prototype of the ideal performer they will feed the machine. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that AI is only as good as its teacher, because right now the AI is not self-aware, it's not able to make its own decisions. So it's a big argument, but some people definitely are more on the fence, and I think that's something that with future research will need to be done to prove that algorithms can be trusted. But there's not only the machine effect, there's also let's not forget human bias behind it.
I do agree with you, and I think that we are right there at the point where AI is augmenting and accelerating most of our process, including recruiting. And now, if there's no more questions, oh, yeah.
So, I think it's a big question because it involves all the professionals in this field. We see an upcoming change, so we see that a lot of work that are repetitive are going to disappear. So I would like to know if there is at least a little consensus. I'm a work psychologist too, but this question is puzzling my mind. How fast is this change is going to come, and how fast are people going to adapt? Because depending on this issue, there could be also not only an organizational issue, but also a societal issue. So that's, if somebody can answer.
Absolutely. That's a question that is puzzling also us. And we don't have definite solution. That's also because I think we are in the curve of change right now. What I can tell you is my take, and then I will leave, of course, everybody else to answer if they feel like. You said adapt, and I don't think it's the right way to put it, because as organizational change happens, I think we need to think ahead of time and rather maximize what we can and minimize what we should avoid, which is, of course, unemployment and all these kind of issues that are related to it. But I'll leave also the other speaker the opportunity to add something if they do.
So I agree with Nicola. And I just want to say that the change is exponential, in fact. Because actually, when I submit the project Marie Curie OrbTech, I was one of the few to work on this subject in psychology and organizational. It's 2 years ago. So three years ago, if we look at the delay, but it's really a big change, because this year, in 2020, we have a lot of literature in Industry 4.0 that emerge. And if the literature is moving like this, it means that we have a moving also in the industry, we have a moving in the organization, and so the change, I think we can't actually really know how the evolution is coming. But the fact is that it's why we are here, it's our role to not predict, but try to do in sort that there is not a change too big and too fast, to help the people from the organization, to help the organization also to adapt and to cope with this change. So the fact is our team is kind of specialized also in the innovation concept, and we think that maybe, in my case, I will talk for my case, I think that we need to develop the proactive thinking to succeed to deal with the change. But the change it's a big change, rapid change, but we can deal with it, and we can do the good things, so we will have routinization, but creation of innovation and a good Industry 4.0. I hope you see what I mean by this quote. Thank you.
All right. Sure. We have other questions coming though.
Okay, well, just a quick word, because AI is part of Industry 4.0, but it's a technology itself. So of the articles that I've read in terms of timeline for the strong AI to enter the workplace, the most optimistic authors think about maybe 10 years, and more, I think in my opinion, more realistic authors say in around 20, 25 years this will enter the workplace. And I think it's very important for researchers to dig on the subject and to do more more studies, also in an empirical way. There's currently no empirical studies done on the subject that I presented today, so the impact on workers. So I think it's very important to do that, and like Leah presented, I think it's very also important to see which job characteristics will need to be highlighted, so that we can ensure that when the technologies come in the workplace, then the people will be performant and motivated.
All right, thank you for your question. We have some questions that are coming from the magical internet. So why do you think that male type features are negative? I don't. I think it's referred to what Vivienne said before. I think what she meant was that the bias that are in the people will translate ultimately in the artificial intelligence. Is that the case?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. Why do you think that male type features are negative?
That was just an example. I mean, I'm referring to some articles that I read. This is coming from a study that was done in a company. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was something like Microsoft, but it's a big organization, and the bias is not mine. That is actually from that company, who had a habit, I don't know, probably historically speaking, of hiring male candidates coming from certain types of universities. So this is a real world example, and that's just the bias that was transmitted to the AI, but it could have been another bias, maybe a preferred female. So that was just an example, and it's just an interesting example because it happened in real life. So, yeah.
All right, thank you. That's also my take on it. I just want to end up with the next question for Lea Freur. And the question that was puzzling me is when you talk about work design, how that relates to job crafting, because you seem to propose a model of a proactive job design that involves also the social side, and so that's kind of my question.
So I think you were referring to the second study I've presented. Okay. So job crafting, for those who don't know what it is in the audience, is so the employee motivation to craft their jobs, and so changing some aspect of your jobs to fit it more to you, to your desire, how you want it. So I think job crafting there's a lot of things in this construct, because so you can have multiple ways to craft your jobs. You have a cognitive way where you so change your appraisal of your job characteristics, and a more behavioral component, so like taking behaviors to really change your work. So maybe negotiating with your leader about I don't know, some work conditions that you want to have. So I'm distinguishing so this research from job crafting literature, because I think job crafting is more a single negotiation process, because I am motivating to negotiate, for example, if we take the behavioral component of job crafting, negotiate with my leader for changing my own job. And I am more interested about how employees, as single employee or as a group, can negotiate, but in a more informal way, from the relationship they have with the leader, and speaking openly with them about the changes they would like in their jobs, for beneficiating to the whole team, and not just for oneself. Yeah.
Thank you very much. We have another question coming from the internet. Is the society's advance regarding mentalities, human rights, etc., some of those advancements occur in the labor spaces as well? How is cultural factor differentiation considered in these replacements of the human workforce by AI? That's that's a very interesting question. So I will summarize it for you if I can, and I hope I get the point. So how is the cultural factor differentiation considered in this future replacement of the human workforce? So how's the cultural differentiation considered in this future replacement of the human workforce by AI?
Thank you. That's a very interesting question. I think, yes, it will be very important to look into how different cultures will adapt. I'm not sure, I hope I'm responding to the question. If not, please let me know. But I mean, the literature comes from different countries around the globe, and I have seen literature coming from countries where the workforce is mainly doing routine tasks, so sort of input, output, and over there is definitely more of a concern into people losing more of their jobs. Yes, the perspective of new jobs being created and everybody being upskilled is, yes, it is very positive, and some people might say it's a little bit idealistic, but especially for some countries where the culture is a little bit different, where people have some certain types of jobs. So yes, there is some awareness of that, and I think different countries are doing research and are adapting their focus depending on their realities. Other than that, I think maybe this question came because we were talking about assessment and different bias. I think, I mean, obviously the goal is to have no bias, which is pretty much impossible. But as much as we want, I think for the AI is something that could be an ideal goal in mind, because humans are so biased in their opinions that whether we like it or not, there are some stereotypes that go around in society. So some people say that AI will be able to reduce all culturally based biases because the machine will be completely neutral and will be able to consider so much information, so much data, much more than human can. So hopefully in the future, the machine will be able to eradicate some of the biases we see today. And yeah, but it's definitely a question that is on a lot of people's mind and that really will need to be considered. I hope I answered the question. If not, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, Viviane. We have 10 minutes left. I have a question for Marco, and I encourage everybody from the internet to write now if they want to have their answer. So, Marco, my question is, in your presentation, you talk about skills, of course, and a difference in importance of those skills. I'm wondering, because I'm studying something very similar, if you are looking at also the emergence of brand new skills, or it could be a configuration of old skills pointing out a new skill.
Yeah, well, we want to try to build in this skill framework that we allow us not only identify the different categories or cluster of skills, we are trying to identify which skill could be more relevant to adapt us to different contexts. For instance, we discuss about the strategic skills. We consider that this could be a cluster of skills that we can use to apply other kind of skills. For instance, we can identify the complex problem solving, or for example, the planning skills. So I establish a goal, and then I try to define an action plan which allow me not only to create a pathway to reach the goal, but also to deal with different potential aspects that could impact in a negative way my action and the capacity to reach the goal. So we consider that we can identify specific skills, personal skills that we can use in these different contexts. But also we recognize that we have to use other kind of skills, for instance, cognitive and basic cognitive skills, and also specific technical skills. So we consider that we can try to identify more functional cluster of skills to define the relevance of these skills in this day and age.
Thank you very much. We have another question from the internet. So, your assessment of future workshop relations is valid for the Western type culture, which affects around 1 billion people. What about the rest, another 6 billion? They do not seem to bother about this. I'll take this one. I think that our workshop regards Industry 4.0, wherever that happens, in the West or the East. I think it bothers a lot less than 1 billion people because it's still, I would say, fringe. So I don't know about the rest, 6 million, but I'm sure it's not a regional topic. I might have misunderstood. Maybe do I need to repeat the question? Maybe? Okay. Your assessment of future workshop relations is valid for the Western type culture, which affects around 1 billion people. What about the rest, another 6 billion? They do not seem to bother about this. Yes.
Well, I think this idea relates with the previous question, because what are the social aspect of this technological revolution? I consider that I come from Latin America, so I know that there's different levels of technological advancements. There are different complex technologies. The cultural aspect of this transformation could be part of this analysis of the organizational transformation. So obviously we have to take into account not only the organizational general aspect of the organizational transformation, but also the society implications, and also the cultural. And we speak cultural is the organization, the culture within the organization. So even if we have to take into account these cultural differences, I think we have to investigate not only the general way, but also the specific cultural aspect of this technological transformation.
Well, yes.
Just to say, like I said in the end of my presentation, it's something we need to investigate also. The transnational aspect, and it was not just transnational about the Western culture, but it's related to global culture. And actually, I will say that if we have the possibility to do research on a global level, we will be really happy, I think. And we will take in account this difference of cultures, because it's one of the principal objectives we have also when we do research on organizational psychology. It's that we know we need to take into account the culture for the organization. So if we do this for the organization, we will also need it to do it for the country where we do the research. But it's something that we need to do in the future. And so we can't really answer totally.
Thank you, Guillaume. So we have 6 minutes left. If there are any other questions from the public, it doesn't seem to be anything new on the tablet, so nothing? Yes, please. I can. Yeah, look, because they're also listening on the web, so if you could, thank you very much.
Hello. I have a question. What is, just imagine if the AI can replace some human workers. So who's earning the money for this kind of wealth? So if we just imagine a company is inventing this AI, robots, whatever stuff, then less people can work for themselves. So how we can distribute, or how we can distribute the money from saving work from the humans, and now the AI is working for us. So this is my question, more or less.
Okay. Thank you. It's a well-spread question. I hear this often, and I think it's a solid point. My take is what we see, as I showed in my presentation, is that there is some tasks that are completely replaced. However, at the same time, what we see is some sort of rebalance of workforce request. It's just a different kind of workforce with different skills associated. However, I understand your fear, if you will, because once again, we are in the middle of a curve, so we don't know what's going to happen in the future. We can just be attentive to what is going on right now. And what we see in our experience in a company is that some tasks are replaced by machinery, but the same person that have many tasks now focus on other tasks in a different way. Sometimes more, sometimes just has a faster pace of working, but that's what we see, at least what I see. Again, if there's any contribution, keep in account, we have 5 minutes.
Yeah,
so.
if I have a quick contribution, I think you answered well the question in terms of the tasks, but also in terms of job loss. What we see is that companies could really, first of all, the wealth will be part of it invested in the machinery and the AI and the algorithms and developing these technologies. And also the investments could be made in terms of educating the workers who are displaced and into, forming them to do new tasks and or to do new jobs within the same company.
Well, thank you very much.
Just to say last things, I think your question was also related to all the movement about the fact to redistribute the profit of the company to people and to create social pay for people. Yeah, it's like told my colleagues, I don't know if we can really imagine this about this situation, because we create new jobs constantly, and we need to develop new characteristics, new skills. But actually, my point of view, but it's mine, I think it could be really interesting if we can redistribute this profit and to create a social kind of grant to live, in fact. And it could be really an interesting thing to do, but I think it's just related to the ethical and to the ethical policies of an organization. And it will maybe be difficult to do it for all the organization. I am not a specialist in this topic, so it's really just take this answer from me, and it's not generalizable, I think. But for the moment, it would be kind of difficult because, like my colleague said, it's creating new characteristics. In my organization, we can see that the new technologies that decrease the difficult task create new tasks, new jobs for the people we have in the organization. And we need to make them learn new things, and so they keep their jobs. And this is really important. But the organization in what I am has a really big ethical objective for its workers. So I don't know if we can generate this situation also.
Thank you very much for your attention. and that will be all. There's 1 minute left, so thank you.